I want to move on to our next panel. Now, this is Looking West. It's about Dublin, the lessons to be learned from Dublin. Now, the reason that we decided that this would be a good subject to address is in a report which we quote very often, which is the Thollins Global Services Outsourcing City of the Year, published every year. And Krakow has been moving up this report for the last 7 years. And this year it overtook Dublin to become the leading European location. What we really wanted to do, however, was to look beyond that headline to say, what does that really mean? Have we really replaced Dublin? Or has Dublin, in fact, moved on to something else? So to investigate that subject, we have, I was going to say the most famous Irishman in Krakow, but I probably shouldn't say that because there are a lot of famous Irish people in Krakow. Eoin, one of the most famous Irish people in Krakow. Eoin, could you join us? Eoin is going to moderate the panel.
Are we on? We are. And thank you, Andrew. And no racial slurs today. I'd like to welcome the panel up. If they'd like to come and join me on the stage. We have Michael, Susan, Barbara, and Robert. The choice of the panel today was for me, was a cross selection of both the business, financial services operations, service providers, and technology capability from the Krakow market. And all of whom have operations both in Krakow and in Dublin, and mostly have come from a starting point in Dublin. So I'd like to start with a context for start a little bit of context for the conversation from everybody to a little bit of context from everybody to do a quick introduction, talk a little bit about their organizational history, the background, partly then getting to the point of why Krakow was a location that was chosen for them, and how we'll get into a conversation a little bit later on how we can learn from their Dublin operations, their Dublin experiences, and what that might mean for the Krakow market. Mike, do you want to start?
Thank you, Eoin. Good morning. My name is Mike McDonald. I'm with Brown Brothers Harriman and have responsibility for our operations and business center here in Krakow. Brown Brothers Harriman is an American banking firm, but has a significant presence here in Europe. We had opened in Krakow in early 2012, and over the last 2 years have hired over 500 people now. So it gives you an indication not only of an emerging market, but maturity with regard to recruitment and the vast talent pool here in the location. What we have built is essentially a business center, financial services center, and I think it was interesting at the outset, the first question that was asked of the audience, I think financial services was tucked in the other category. And I think it's obviously an opportunity for us to talk a little bit more today about really the opportunities, from my view, in financial services and in particular the investment funds industry, I think in addition to technology. But how did we arrive in Krakow? A couple of years ago, we looked at really an opportunity to open an additional office in Europe, primarily to focus on activities that we had historically performed in the U.S. on behalf of our clients in Europe and Asia. So we had a great opportunity now over the last couple of years to transition that activity to Krakow and is now much more significantly aligned with our clients in Europe. We've also built a technology center here in Krakow. Again, historically, all of our technology folks have been resident in the U.S., and we now have an opportunity through technology to be more closely aligned with our business in Europe as well. And then the last focus in opening in Krakow is predominantly around our growth in Europe. More than half of our revenues now are outside of the U.S. We've experienced significant growth in Europe and in the funds industry in Luxembourg and Dublin in particular. So Krakow has now provided us with a great opportunity to build scale and build competency as well in this market to help support our growth in those locations. And we've had great success over the last couple of years. And I think when we talk to our colleagues in the U.S. and around the world, we've exceeded expectations with our ability to develop a business center here and a lot of the success that we've had over the last, since January of 2012, essentially.
My name is Barbara Palys. I represent Arvato Finance here in Krakow. My role is global, so I'm Global Operations Manager for Collection, and I'm there because Arvato is the company that moved the operations from Dublin to Krakow. So the operations have been moved last year, and since 6 months we are proving that this transfer is successful. We provide services to a big customer known by everyone here, probably Google, and it's in area of account receivable, not only collection but also part of customer service. So Arvato Finance in Dublin provided services for Google for the past 10 years. Over these 10 years, as we all know, Krakow was growing. We joined European Union, people were educated. Also, we learned that we can find easily people with European languages here. So last year, there was an important decision made that providing service for European market can be done from Krakow. So I'm representing a particular area, collection, and here languages are extremely important. During this transfer, we've learned that we can easily find in Krakow market well-educated people, but also people speaking European languages which are to the near native level. So the biggest difference from my perspective between Dublin and Krakow operation is in regards to the languages. So the requirement for Dublin was that there are native speakers who provide services in European languages. Here in Krakow, we don't have this requirement. We can provide service with these near native languages, and we can easily find people with such languages. What's also quite innovative, I would say, for Arvato Finance, we have joined this quite innovative idea of BPO home. So we are providing service from the facility and location which is owned by Google. And Arvato delivers services via human resources people.
My name is Susan Cox. I'm MD of CoxFitzsimonsWilkes. We're a financial recruitment specialist company. We set up the company in Dublin in 2003 when we saw an opportunity to deliver specialist financial recruitment services to what was a rapidly growing accounting and finance sector. In 2008, we set up our company in Poland when a number of our clients who were Dublin-based were starting to look to Poland, and we felt with the experience and knowledge we had, we could offer our service to them here in Poland, as well as continue to do that in Dublin. It's been an interesting journey. I've been in the recruitment business myself for over 15 years and worked in the States, in San Francisco during the dot-com boom. Worked in Dublin during its growth and seen some pretty choppy waters in recent years. And now, over the last number of years, I've had the wonderful experience of working in this high-growth market. What I hope to share in the conversation today is some of the experience I've seen in both markets, and how, in addition to what the guys talked about, in the earlier panel about the next 5 years, I think indeed we're already seeing some of that change. Clients who come to us, expect to find this accounting and finance skill here, but now they focus on the soft skills. Can they find people who can manage these large teams in performance-based environments? And can they find people who are flexible and dynamic and who can adapt to change? So hopefully we can talk a bit more about that.
I will try to use this one. Hi, I'm Robert Liziniewicz, representing OpenJaw Technologies. relatively small company delivering IT solutions or software solutions for travel industry. Our local office was established recently after a few years of investigations and many help of many people, including people from this room. The aim of the office is to extend development power or development resources of the Irish office, and the reason was very simple. There is a huge competition for IT resources for software developers in Dublin, and company executives started to look for a place where it's not geographically distant, it's not culturally distant, has a good connection, has proven investments in IT industry, and the best location for it was Krakow. So starting from mid of last year, we are developing software development center. Right now, relatively small, but the aim is to become a peer part of a wider organization and become a peer lab compared to other locations of OpenJaw.
Okay, I think to start the discussion, one of the things I'd like to refer back to was the introduction Andrew made, talking about the Tholins report. And a number of years of improved scoring for Krakow has now shown or has now perceived it to be a more attractive investment location than Dublin. I guess my question to the panel, do you believe or do you feel that's a fair comparison? Is there more detail to the situation underneath it? Are we talking about equal markets, a mature market versus an emerging market? That's my starting question. Mike, I don't know if you want to take that first. Okay. Get him a microphone.
Short on microphones, but sure. I think, and this would be through the lens of financial services and investment fund services in particular. There might be a different view with technology, but I think if you look at maturity versus emerging, there's no question that Dublin is a mature market. I think the survey is a great reflection of Krakow as a location and all the excellent things that have been happening over the years, but I think that's primarily targeted to outsourcing activity. I think when you look at supporting financial services, and in particular the investment funds industry, it still is very much an emerging market. Our friends at State Street arrived several years ago, but when you consider that growth over the last few years, there's still only a few firms within the financial services sector here in Krakow and in Wrocław that are supporting that industry. So I would still have the perspective that we're in an emerging cycle in that sector. I think there's a lot that we can learn from Dublin, and if you look at Dublin 10 or 15 years ago, there's very similar characteristics with the challenges that we're facing today in Krakow. New entrants to the market, a need to develop skill set and competence, and also competitiveness here locally as firms to continue to grow. But there's no question there's great opportunity as well. You know, our example over the last 2 years, the ability to build a center with over 500 folks is something that I don't think would have the ability to do in other locations. Before we opened in Krakow, we looked at 3 or 4 cities in Ireland, and we chose Krakow because of those opportunities and our confidence in our ability to grow as an organization. But with that growth comes great opportunity to continue to develop skill sets so that we can move from an emerging to a mature market. And Dublin has been able to do that over the last 15 years. They, along with Luxembourg, are no question the location that investment funds around the world are looking to establish product. And Dublin did a very nice job over that time period developing the skill sets and competency necessary to support those business lines. And that's something that's going to be very critical in this market to continue to develop the skill sets around investment funds.
Just to follow on that from Mike, I mean, in the IFSC alone in Dublin, that's what we call the International Financial Services Centre, there's a representation of over half of the world's largest banks, like Citibank, JP Morgan, Sumitomo Bank. That's something that was an initiative by the Irish government in the late 80s, early 90s, and it now employs over 35,000 people. And that's in addition to 35,000 people employed in the business services sector. as Ramek said in a summary in the earlier panel, Krakow has that potential, you know, to double the size it is currently. And certainly from Ireland, with a population of only 4 million, it's amazing that they can create, you know, the multinationals have created 70,000 jobs. So I think, you know, the lessons from Ireland is Ireland managed to carve out a niche, and that niche can, you know, is already being carved out here and can be done so exponentially.
Let me comment on what Mike said, that we are like Dublin was 15, 20 years ago. I cannot comment how it looks from financial institutions' perspective or business process outsourcing. However, looking at the growth of the software sector in Krakow, I think the distance is much smaller. If you look into the past, the boom in Ireland was about late 90s, beginning of 2000, 2001. The boom in Krakow, the most investments started around 2005, 2007. So the distance can be counted as 5-7 years. And I think we also have a potential due to the universities, due to the skilled people. And I think we still have a potential to limit the distance even more.
Following up on Susan, what you had commented on the, let's say, the population dynamics in Dublin, a small country. You know, another aspect in there is that over half of the software engineers in Ireland, particularly in Dublin, over half of the software engineers are non-Irish. So something has been done to consciously create Dublin as a destination, and I know some of us use that same expression or that same ideal for a Krakow market. What are the things that you guys have seen or that you could recommend either the Aspire market looks at in terms of creating an attractive destination target to help accelerate the 35,000 to 70,000 that Ramek has promised everybody we're going to achieve? It's on video.
Well, Ireland joined the EU in the 70s, so, you know, we have quite a significant advance on that, and there's been, you know, really strong labour mobility from other European countries into Ireland over the last 20 years. That initially addressed our language issue, which Barbara touched on and may touch further on, but I mean, so European mobility was definitely one thing that was really helpful for Ireland. Obviously, everybody knows about our 12.5% corporation tax, which helps significantly too. But I think in recent times, the work permit matter is more prevalent. I don't work so much in the IT sector, but certainly in the IT sector in Dublin, there's been recent regulatory change to just make it a whole lot easier again. So they have now looked at making it faster, making it less bureaucratic, and making it family friendly, so that people, you know, of all levels can enter the Irish market. I think they'd be some of the things that I've seen that have really helped in recent years.
I think maybe to add to that, there are a couple of points made this morning at Romek's session around really the industry's opportunity and really all of our responsibility to start to develop industry knowledge more effectively. And I think the comment was developing people more than process, essentially. And that's very relevant to this debate. I think one of the critical areas, if you consider that growth and where we want to grow in the future, education is considerable. I think one of the benefits to the Ireland success story over the last 10 or 15 years has been considerable alignment with the industry bodies, with the universities, and with government agencies as well. And that's something that I think Aspire as an organization, many firms in town have spent a lot of time with the universities here, but I think a lot of the interaction and engagement over the last few years has been with student organizations primarily. And I think there's great opportunity to work more closely with the universities so that we can add and build curriculum within those universities to really prepare students to move into particular sectors of the market. And investment funds is an example of that. In Ireland, years ago, through the Institute of Bankers, had created an investment fund certificate program. And also, not just in Dublin, but in other locations, I think Limerick and Belfast are good examples as well, where the lecturers and professors are going into the organizations for lengths of time to really understand the business and bring that back to the university and create a curriculum, create programs so that students have an understanding about investment funds as an industry and financial services, and it's prepared those folks much more effectively to move into the market. And I think if we leverage that kind of an approach, I think it will be a very, very positive result as we have graduates coming, and the demographic and the opportunity with the number of graduates that we see coming out of universities every year in this location. I think the reality is it positions us more effectively than perhaps Dublin was 10 years ago.
Barbara, can you talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned your Irish operation. I'm not too sure if it was a client obligation or an operational one looked at native speakers, and that requirement doesn't exist as you've moved your operations to Krakow. What are the dynamics that have made for that change?
Yes, so exactly as I mentioned, there was an obligation, contractual obligation for Dublin operations to provide native speaking people delivering services to different European countries. I'm not sure why those obligations were in the contract. However, I can imagine that it's easy to have access to those people in Dublin. In Krakow, however, we have people who finished universities and they speak pretty fluently different European languages, and the level of the language also as confirmed by our clients is near native and is sufficient to provide the service to the agreed level. That's why I believe that Krakow has still the potential, and I don't see the risk, which I think I saw maybe 10 years ago when I joined this business, BPO sector in Krakow, that the operations can be moved even further to Asia. Because the strength for Krakow is access to different European languages.
And Robert, looking from that skill set and creating that destination, how does that look from a technology or software perspective?
What is a disadvantage for Dublin and advantage for Krakow here? But in IT industry, the expectation is everybody speaks English, So we do not expect any other languages. Regarding what Susan said before about what are the incentives, what are the processes built to speed up building Dublin as a destination, I think we are still ahead of this. We do not have any help regarding green card, regarding employing people from outside of the EU. Also, from within the EU perspective, I think we are at a lower scale of the salary ranges, so it would be more difficult to attract people from Western Europe. We can count on new EU members. But what's really difficult in Poland is limited mobility of Polish people. I would say it's still cultural, it's still in people's minds that they are not enough mobile.
Okay, so the last question I wanted to share from the panel, and I wanted to touch on this one to connect to our conference last year where Wally Allen spoke to us about branding, spoke to us about a Krakow brand, spoke to us about a market brand. And certainly my own personal experience, the Ireland brand, the Ireland Inc. brand was something that was developed very aggressively and to an extent in a very polished, sophisticated manner with the IDA and foreign investors. What do you think the differences or the experiences you might have had from your Irish operational setup, and what are the things that, let's say, again, Aspire and looking at our own market, what are the things we can do differently, do the same? What are the things we don't do today that might be either necessary or advantageous to us as we continue to develop the market?
Okay, maybe I'll start. That's been the format. But I think one of the areas, and I think it's similar to the topic that we just discussed around comparisons between Krakow and Dublin, but I think government engagement and alignment with the government authorities on really what's critical to building and developing a location is very important. I think part of that helps grow our brand. I think it gives good recognition to external organizations that are looking to open in Krakow. I think what's also critical is not just the external aspects of brand, but internally as well. And I think there's clearly opportunities for us to enhance the environment and the flexibility in the operating environment with how we're managing our business. I think we, in our first couple of years in Krakow, spent quite a bit of time with our colleagues around the world to give a good understanding of labor law, things like working hours, overtime, background checks, a lot of different topics that won't necessarily come up in other locations around the world. And I think from a branding perspective, really to optimize the opportunities in the market and to create a location that's very, very interesting to others. And also, if you look at growth in the industry, the majority of the growth over the last few years have been from existing firms as well. So in order for those organizations and our firms to continue to grow, that operating environment needs to be quite flexible. And again, I think that's aligned with our ability to really enhance the brand as a location, and that's something that Dublin's done quite effectively.
So from my perspective, I can say that Krakow is a strong brand. Currently, the only risk that client foresee with more and more competitive companies coming in to the city is the attrition. So this is the risk that people will migrate between the companies.
I think a couple of things. Robert touched on it about mobility inside Poland. I mean, certainly, you know, in 2008 when we first started recruiting here, I would have seen that as a significant problem. In the accounting and finance sector, this is changing a bit. It's slowly changing, and I think one of the reasons it is because the salary differential between the cities is beginning to flatten out a little. When I first came, I was recruiting in Wrocław, and the idea of someone moving from Warsaw to Wrocław was almost unthinkable. In recent years, in the last 2 years or so, we've certainly had the experience of people moving from Warsaw to indeed Krakow and down to Wrocław as well. We used to talk a lot about a community of Polish people who worked abroad, and they were a skill set that many companies really sought after. For Polish young people who had worked in London, in Luxembourg, in the US, and in Ireland, that they were bringing the global mindset home. And this is still happening, but possibly not to the extent that it was 2 or 3 years ago. Ireland as an island has, historically always had people fleeing from our shores. So this is something that our Irish diaspora is pretty significant group that we tap into all the time. We just happen to be a little nation of people who seem to turn up everywhere. So maybe Poland, there is a big Polish diaspora in the US as well, on the East Coast for sure. And, that along with, I suppose, as we all talk about, the Irish IDA have done a phenomenal job, and Aspire and organisations like it, I think we'll need to keep pushing. I just thought the happy video last night was absolutely wonderful, and that type of energy is what the outside world needs to know more about.
For software development, Krakow is famous because of the companies and because of a special economic zone. It has two aspects. First is that it's much easier to get help from the government, from local government, for big companies, for big investments. But it's much more difficult for smaller investments. On the other side, from time to time, there are articles in press questioning whether Krakow can become next Silicon Valley. But in fact, we should expect much more help for smaller companies, for smaller investments, which can be more innovative and bring us faster to become second Silicon Valley. And to comment on what Basia said about potential attrition, the success of Krakow became a kind of snowball. One investment pulls another investment in IT industry. We can end up with a battle for talent, battle for people, and we have to count on universities to train more and better people. And otherwise, we will end up in a battle for talent.
And just to wrap it up, maybe for Susan or for Mike, we talk about the brand. As you come into Krakow from outside, or Susan, you continue to operate and live and work in Dublin as well. What is that external perception of the Krakow brand? How is it perceived, outside of the market as investors think about locations?
I'll go first this time. Well, for investors, what I'm seeing the change is that, previously Krakow was initially seen as this, and Poland as having this great array of graduates. There was just an unending supply. And this was their first question would always be about graduates and what the salaries for graduates could be and what was the price point and could they go lower, could they go higher, where was it? In the last year, I'm not hearing that question at all. The question now is, what is the functional skill set available in Krakow? How many accountants have US GAAP accounting? How many people can do regulatory reporting? Where the reputation is changing and evolving, I think, all the time, and that's the world we're in now. The pace of change is just significant. So, brand Poland is getting more sophisticated all the time. And it's seen as, a knowledge economy. And the clients that we're speaking to, they expect to find the skill set, and then they start asking about, the softer pieces. They ask about the flexibility. They ask about, whether people are dynamic. And so they're starting to ask different questions. So I think it's changing.
I think you're right, and I think part of that change is moving. Again, it was said this morning as well. The movement from cost and a focus on reduction in cost to really where are we adding value. And I think I mentioned in the opening that our development of the center and ability to onboard over 500 staff has been exceptional. So the perception from our colleagues around the world has been very, very positive and favorable. That's part of the reaction to that has been that rapid growth and hitting targets now that we didn't consider 2.5 years ago. I think the question then becomes sustainability and our ability over the next several years to continue to move through the complexity curve. I think it's not only the perception internally with our colleagues around the world, but also our external clients. We've only been open for 1.5 years, and we've had over 15 or 20 of our client investment fund clients visit Krakow to get a good understanding of what have we developed, what's the responsibilities here in Krakow, but most importantly, meeting and interacting with the talent here locally and getting comfort with our ability to transition activity from other locations into Krakow, but at the same time be very much integrated in a global service model. And that has gone very, very well. I think the challenge, again, is sustainability and ensuring that we continue to create the framework and the infrastructure to grow in complexity as well and continue to provide those external services to our clients.
I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the panel. I want to thank their contributions. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.